topic that we are going to discuss today, which is indeed a pretty topical and wide-ranging issue. We are going to discuss about women in the energy transition. And I am also grateful to my colleagues here who, for the first time in the history of the Policy Advisory Council of the Florence School of Regulation, have decided to devote one of the sessions to this topic and to make it available to anyone who wants to attend. So thank you very much. Today, we are going to have a pretty dense session. We have invited a wide range of speakers from different perspectives. The event will be divided into two main parts. In the first part, after the opening, we will have a panel debate. And we will have many distinguished speakers from several geographical origin, and I'm really looking forward to introduce them to you later on. And in the second part, we are going to have the official launch of the Energy Base. The Energy Base is a database devoted to shedding a light really on women, experts women in the energy, sustainability and climate sectors. And it is a specific achievement of the Lights on Women initiative, which is part of the Florence School of Regulation. And for this session, I will pass the floor to Claudia Carella, who is the coordinator of the FSR Lights on Women project, for the official launch and also for the comments of the donors who have kindly contributed to setting up this initiative. But I think this is enough in terms of giving you the perspective of what is expecting you. We will start with the first a small video, which is an extract actually of an interview that I had the pleasure of recording a few days ago in Brussels with the Director General of the Department for Energy at the European Commission, Dittel Jorgensen. And we were very happy to extract this small part, which works for us as an endorsement of this initiative. So if we are ready. Women in the energy sector are underrepresented, unfortunately, as of today. There is now a big sentiment that something should be done to balance the presence of women in the energy sector. We at FSR are doing something in our what is possible in our conditions. What is the European Commission doing on this?
So specifically in the energy sector and here in DG Energy, we have set up an equality network. It's both about gender equality, but it's also about other aspects of equality. And we've got this really excellent and very, very nice group of colleagues who are super committed, engaged, and really bringing this process forward, working with women and men who work in the energy sector, who work in all different, whether it's industry or academia or other parts. And so really to identify the issues and what can we do. What's quite interesting at the moment in European energy policy is that we have a female commissioner, Kadri Simpson, we have a female president, Ursula von der Leyen, and I'm here as the Director General in DG Energy, and so we actually have quite a strong female representation. I was yesterday speaking at an event, sitting in a panel, and there was one man and 5 women, and so 4 women, sorry. And so I think we do see a change, and that's of course only at some levels and in some contexts, but I do hope that that sends a signal to the sector more widely that this is possible and you can, it's a good place to work, it's an interesting place to work.
Yeah. Yes, that's great. As I was saying, at Florence School, we are trying to tackle this issue. Particularly you mentioned panels, and we really do not want to see any longer these manuals where you have basically 5 or 6 or more only men. So in order to do this, for example, we are launching now the Energy Base. It's a database for female energy experts, and we hope that this contribution will help moving forward in the direction that you just mentioned.
It's such a nice, it's such a good idea, such a good initiative. And I can tell you we have a lot of good female experts here in DG Energy, so they can join your
With pleasure.
your lineup, I hope.
With pleasure. That's
Great.
good. Okay, so this was, I think, a very encouraging start. So we are all very happy about the availability of Ms. Dita Juhl-Jorgensen. Now I'm going to give the floor to our director of the Robert Schuman Center for Advanced Studies here at the European University Institute, which has also recently progressed a lot, I think, in committing on this topic. Eric, very welcome and thanks for being with us.
Well, listen, Ilaria, I mean, the thanks really go to you. Look, my name is Eric Jones. I'm director of the Robert Schuman Center. And when I first started this job 15 months ago, I taught myself to say the same phrase over and over, which is that the Robert Schuman Center exists to take cutting edge academic research and make it relevant and accessible to stakeholders in the public and the private sector. And I thought that pretty much captured everything we do and everything we need to do. And what colleagues like Ilaria have taught me is that that's not nearly enough, because what we also need to do is to take cutting edge researchers and make them relevant and accessible to stakeholders in the public and private sector. And that's particularly true when we're talking about researchers who are underrepresented, given the enormous contributions that they make. Now, I say this as a grizzled old white man who is very, very comfortable hearing these responses from colleagues. Oh, we couldn't find enough women for the panel because there just aren't enough women out there. And the real response to that is, then you haven't looked hard enough. And looking hard enough means using all the resources that are available. And I cannot thank you enough, Claudia and Ilaria. I cannot thank you enough for taking that excuse away. Because the energy base basically says, here, let me make this easy for you. The expertise is there. The contributions are impressive. Pay attention. If we can do that, I think we will have gone further than I could have imagined when I first stepped into this job, and I'm only a year into the position. So I figure I still have a lot to learn. Thank you guys so much. I'm only sorry I can't stay for the panel, but I'm so grateful that you involved me in presenting it.
Many thanks, Eric. Thanks for this great support. Thanks a lot. It's very important for us. Let me just remind you that, well, first of all, this is a teamwork. It's something we really care highlighting. The Lights on Women initiative was founded already 5 years ago. We have one of the founders here online. You will hear from her later. And it has been carried on as an important project, an important activity of the school. And it's really a choral activity. Many people are involved, men and women. And that's probably one of the reasons why we are seeing progress in achieving the targets we want to achieve. But the thank yous are really at the end, so we'll leave it for later. I would now open the discussion session. So we have a panel that is going to discuss the important topic of today: women in the energy transition, the gap that does exist in the energy sector, and because this is not just something to not because this is something that everybody now has by now acknowledged that there is this gap, it doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be supported by attentive research and data. And that's what we want to bring actually today. And for this reason, we invited the IEA, the International Energy Agency, Ashley Hacker, a gender energy data analyst. And we are very happy to have you here, Ashley, today with us. We look forward to hearing from you on the work that the International Energy Agency has been doing on this important work stream. There have been some publications there, and I know that you're going to provide us with a sort of recap of the main findings. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction. Is that for the slides? Thanks. So yes, as mentioned, I'm hoping to give a nice context for the panel discussions today, discussing what we've learned so far at the IEA on gender gaps in the energy sector. So to start, I'll give a brief context for this work stream within the agency. And then I will get into some of our main outputs and tools that we hope can be used by many of you here going forward. But I'll spend most of my time focusing on our findings, showing some trends and key data points to start the discussion. So just the context at the IEA, so we've been able to work on gender thanks to a mandate from our ministers that was in 2019. That's also when we joined the Equality and Energy Transitions Initiative. It was previously called C3E for those who are familiar. So for that, we are responsible for the work stream on data and knowledge collection. So that's a very exciting initiative that also has its own data work. And so I recommend checking out their website as well. Otherwise, we had voluntary contributions, which were very key to helping us develop this work. And just to mention this, my apologies. So this was this gives you the information. But yeah, so this past year, we also were able to create the IEA Gender Advisory Council to really strengthen all of this work because we're hoping to. So today I'm presenting on some of the gender specific reports and analysis that we've done, but we are trying to mainstream gender across the agency, and you'll see more and more in a lot of our key reports and new reports coming out. We are adding a gender dimension, gender chapters, gender focus. So that's something to look forward to going forward. And yes, so with that in mind, I'll get into some of our main outputs. The first is all the articles, reports, publications that we've been able to do. I've linked a few in here that are just related to the topics I'll be covering, but I also have a link to the page that has all of our information. A second, a very concrete output we've had this past year was creating a policymaker's manual. So this is giving concrete tools for energy ministries to help them with gender mainstreaming within their governments. And then something that will be the main focus for the results I'll be showing you today is the Gender and Energy Data Explorer. So for the past 2 years, we've been developing an ensemble of gender indicators for the energy sector. We currently have data on 4 different topics. The first is entrepreneurship. The second is innovation. Those 2 topics are very key for the clean energy transition to really ensure solutions that are inclusive and sustainable, and also just to have the urgency that we have to find solutions to the climate crisis. It really requires drawing from all the talents, all the diverse ideas. So diversity is really key to that. And there's a lot of literature I could cite to explain why that's important. But yeah, given the large gaps in the energy sector, this is now even more critical to address. We also have indicators on senior management and employment, which are very linked, of course. And this goes into the same issue I was mentioning for the climate crisis, but expanding larger than that if we just think about the sustainability of the sector going forward and yeah, long-term achievements. So this slide just gives you So this slide gives you an overview of the coverage for all the data that we have now available. It's all public. We've designed this with hoping that academia, international organizations, intergovernmental, that everyone will be able to use it. We show the data at a yearly level, at a country level. We have regional aggregates when we're able to create those, and all of the indicators except for employment have global coverage and time series going back for 2 decades. And we also put a lot of work into breakdowns within the energy sector. So for anyone who's working within a specific subsector of energy, I invite you to explore some of the data sets. We might have something that's specific for you to observe how the trends are developing. So that's just an overview, but I think it's nice to mention it, I mean, for your use, but also because this is the data, most of the data I will be citing is directly from the portal. Just to mention, we are working this year to develop the employment data so that we can have a more global coverage. We're hoping to collaborate with the ILO for this. And we're also would love to add education and energy poverty as topics to the Data Explorer. So getting into the topics, I'll start with entrepreneurship. So the data we have shows that the share of startups that have at least one female founder is consistently lower in the energy sector. However, looking at another indicator, if we see the average amount raised per startup, the energy sector seems to be doing much better than non-energy, which has a larger gap. I mean, part of this might be the lack of gender diverse startups within the sector, but it's definitely a promising data point to observe. Moving on to innovation, we used a database with all patents in the world and categorizing them by fossil fuel technology, clean energy transition technology, and then observing the total technology trends. We can see in this graph that the share of patents that have at least one female inventor has been growing notably and consistently over the past couple of decades. So this is wonderful to see that the energy sector is not being left behind with the global trends. On the other hand, so this is splitting the share of female inventors by country of residence, looking at the OECD compared to the world. So the world seems to be progressing a bit more than we see in OECD countries. But these are just, for the moment, these are descriptive statistics. So we're still, we need to do further analysis and have more granular data to break down some of the reasons for this. Okay, getting to employment, which I think is one of the biggest topics for today. Using survey data, we worked with some experts at the OECD to calculate not only the unconditional gender wage gaps, but also the conditional wage gaps based on skills. So in this graph, you'll see that there is not a clear trend of the energy sector doing better or worse than non-energy. However, one of the reasons is we really have a preliminary problem. There are very few women in energy across the board. Even with our most recent data. And I mean, the gaps are quite large. So this is a big issue for us to look into, which is also why, so I'll mention this trend, but just to say that we've done some further analysis that I'll be presenting on that today, because it is such a huge issue and something we're hoping to shed more light on, but there's much more work to be done for sure. So just to mention, this is, we have breakdowns by many different dimensions on the Data Explorer, and then this is just one interesting trend we found when we break it down by the size of the firm. So within the energy sector, we see across all countries that the smaller firms have larger employment gaps, and this trend doesn't hold at all for the non-energy sector. So if I show the same graph, it's very diverse trends depending on the country. And just to mention that there's other IEA analysis that we've done, which has looked into the fact that larger companies tend to have more exterior pressures. They tend to have more official HR policies and regulation that help with diminishing gender bias and discrimination in hiring and pay practices. Also requirements to make pay and hires and promotions more transparent. All of that we know can be helpful, and this is potentially a confirmation of that, just seeing this such a distinct trend for the energy sector and the larger firms. Next, looking at senior management. So this is data that we have at the global level, just for these indicators, whereas the employment data was for a selection of countries in Europe, North America, and also Australia. So for this data globally, we can see that the share of women in senior management has been growing consistently over the past decade, both in energy and non-energy. It's plateaued around 15%. And the higher values, just to mention for the energy sector that we see below, is mainly because there's very few data points for those years. And that's something that we've made very transparent in the Data Explorer. So I hope to, be very clear about that. So with this data, if we break down the share of female senior managers by the decade of birth, we see a nice positive trend for energy with greater diversity among younger generations. This is the same for the non-energy sector. Always good to see, though, hopeful for the future. However, one unfortunate finding is when we break down the share of female senior managers by position, and this is only showing a selection of positions. We have quite a few more in the portal. But we see that the energy sector has lower shares of women in every single position that we have, except for board members. And the reason why this can be problematic is because a board member position, it can in some cases be more of help a company appear more diverse without properly having diversity in some of its most influential roles. So just something important I wanted to highlight there. As I mentioned, we are very interested in breaking into why there are so few women in the energy sector, and we collaborated with the Employment, Labor, and Social Affairs Directorate of the OECD this past year to use very granular data for 5 countries in Europe and to try to break down reasons for the gender wage gap. So this is just some of the key findings. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to get into the whole report, but I think these are some of the most important takeaways that can also help spark our discussion today. So the first is that we found disproportionately higher shares of women in low-wage firms and occupations in the energy sector. We also found that bargaining and discrimination plays a bigger role in energy firms at explaining the gender wage gap compared to non-energy firms. And lastly, we found that women working in energy are more likely to leave for another sector than those working outside the energy sector. And this last finding was actually quite significant because we compared we had graphs for all the different possibilities of what movement a person could have. So this was using linked employer-employee data. So we have information at the firm level and at the employee level as well. And so for here, we saw cases of a person who stays within a firm, a person who leaves the firm within the energy sector, switches to a different one, someone who's leaving the sector for another sector, or someone who's leaving the workforce. In all the cases, energy, non-energy, they had the same, I'd say, the same distribution by gender, that there was always one gender that was above the other on the curve. And the only case where it was the opposite was for this trend, so leaving for another sector. And the reason I think that's really important to note is it tells us there's not just a pipeline problem here. Yes, we do need to get more women in STEM. Yes, that is something to focus on. But there's also an issue of retention and that we have women in the energy sector that are choosing more than men to leave it and go find other sectors. So this is just the graph I mentioned. So showing the switch and the trends there. But I will stop there and open the discussion. Thank you so much for your time.
Many thanks, Ashley. Extremely interesting and really providing support with data to issues and problems that we are all aware of. But thank you very much for being particularly so clear in your explanation. If there are any questions, please, particularly with I'm talking now to our participants online, don't hesitate to write in the Q&A box. I see already something popping up, and maybe if time allows, we will try to answer them at the end of the panel. But now let me just introduce you to the next 2 panelists. So we have with us, we are very happy to have with us Colette Honorable, partner at Reed Smith and leader of the Energy Regulatory Group there, and former commissioner of the Federal Energy Research Commission in the US. Colette, thanks for being with us today virtually.
Thank you so much for having me.
And the next panelist is Blandine Molla. She's a researcher at AGE, which is the Institute for European Institute for Gender Equality, pardon me. Thank you very much for being with us, Blandine, also remotely this time.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be here.
So I would like to give the floor to each of you for approximately 6-7 minutes, as we agreed, and we'll be very happy to listen to your reaction to Ashley's presentation. And since you also come from different perspectives, anything you'd like to add based on your own experiences, of course, very welcome. And Colette, please, let's start with you.
Thank you so much, Ilaria. And I certainly want to thank the EUI, the Florence School of Regulation, for allowing us to help in the launch of Energy Base. We're super excited to help shine a light on women. And it's wonderful to see and be with so many friends, even though virtually. I hope to see you all soon in Peru in 2023. I'm delighted to be here. I'm also glad that Ashley highlighted the study from IEA. I had planned to do so until I saw that she would be arriving. And I want to juxtapose some of the findings that are found in the energy sector with really a highlight, if I could bring in a little global view of what's happening in corporate America, primarily in the US, to help align or highlight a number of disparities in how women are showing up in the workforce in the energy sector. And I will speak broadly for the energy sector and utility sector. And I also background my comments in stating that we're in an interesting time in the energy sector. Number one, we are still in the midst of the COVID pandemic. And there is one study that I will highlight that really brings that issue to bear for women in particular. Also, a number of places around the world are still grappling with economic challenges, with recessions, with a lack of employment. Interestingly, in the US, our employment is quite low at 3.7%. I would also kind of lay in as a backdrop for my comments the fact that we're all in the midst of quite an interesting energy transition. So many of us around the world have really committed to goals for net zero or 100% renewable resources where we live or where we work. And alongside a number of commitments we've made globally, and certainly on the backdrop of COP27, which was recently held. I want to really focus my comments on a number of studies, so allow me to layer in with Ashley's reference to the IEA study. The 2022 study conducted by McKinsey and Company for Lean In, and this Women in the Workplace study was the largest study on the state of women in corporate America. I'm going to highlight, as you will see, a number of challenges similar to those that Ashley has raised. Number one, 49% of women leaders in corporate America say flexibility is one of the 3 things that they consider when deciding to stay or to leave a place of employment, compared to 34% of men leaders. In the energy and utility sectors, companies fail to promote women consistently to middle management positions, and then secondly, to promote them to senior leadership positions. So I would suggest that we do have a number of women to lead in these roles. It's up to current leadership to tap and identify, and also to grow that talent in women. This study in 2022 also found that women leaders are overworked and under-recognized. And also, 43% of women leaders are burned out compared to 31% of men. What was interesting in this study also was that by a margin of 2 to 1, women more often focused on DE&I, or diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, where men did not as often. Equally, that employers often did not recognize this work in performance evaluations. This is critical and key because we know that this work is instrumental to the success of an organization. And so it's imperative to call that out. I want to offer a few other solutions, and then I want to, well, maybe I should also talk about a couple of other studies and then offer my solutions. Number one, the Harvard Business School, this was a study conducted in February of 2016. It found that firms or companies with more women in the C-suite are more profitable. So we aren't just talking about whether it's good to have women in the workplace and whether it helps the company to have women in the workplace. We know, and studies have demonstrated time and again, and some of these are global studies, that having women in senior leadership really inures to the success of the company, the profitability of a company. The 2020 McKinsey study that I'll reference is against the 2019 gender study that found that gender matters in terms of profitability. They went a step further in 2020 and found that, yes, in the midst of COVID-19, this pandemic that we're in, not only does gender matter, but diversity and inclusion matters even more. And that when there was greater representation and leadership of women, the company likely outperformed. So we know that this is the case not only in corporate America, but all over the world. And I therefore would offer some solutions that I'm certain the launch of Energy Base will help us achieve. Number one, we all must commit to place more women in leadership roles. Not only is it a good thing to do, it's the right thing to do. And statistics have demonstrated that women are overlooked in identifying them as potential leaders of companies, of commissions, of firms. We also need to create and foster employee resource groups specifically for women. This is an important cultural aspect that has been well underway around the world for decades. And I'm still a little mystified as to why a number of leading institutions do not have these employee resource groups. We need them in other areas too, but today we're highlighting and putting a spotlight on women. So it's something that we need to keep in mind. We also need to all commit to making sure that in the annual performance evaluation process that we include an element focused on DE&I in the annual evaluation process. I am both on the board of my law firm. It's a global firm. We have 30 offices around the world. For every one of our leaders, for everyone that's coming up for promotion, we ask that question: what are you doing in terms of your citizenship to the organization? And I'm also on the board of a Fortune 200 utility that is a leader globally in diversity and inclusion. And this is a critical element of every leader of the utility and energy company more broadly. We also should be committed to allowing flexible or remote work. We just heard Ashley speak about that issue. And this is a critical element for identifying that the significant roles that women play, not only in the workplace, but also at home. And women are burned out and working harder than ever before, today more than ever. Along those lines, we also need to create and maintain wellness programs within our organizations. Let's be real and identify the fact that mental health challenges continue to persist, and that we as leaders need to identify opportunities and resources to help our colleagues bring their whole selves and their healthy selves to work every day. The last point I would mention as a recommendation is that we should not only promote women into middle management, but alongside that recommendation, we should also stand up leadership training modules that are consistent and carried out annually to make sure that women are not stuck in middle management once they get there, but that we are helping to train and promote women to senior management. And in fact, we know as a result of these studies that have been conducted that our corporations and firms will be better for it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to provide this intervention, and I look forward to the dialogue today.
Many thanks, Colette. Well said. Let me give the floor now to Blandine, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to this session. I'm really very happy to join you for this discussion all the way from Vilnius, Lithuania. It was a pleasure to hear Ashley's presentation, and I would like to react to some of her findings in particular as they align or as they contrast with the situation in the EU. And I would also like to mention what we are observing as consequences of the underrepresentation of women in the climate and energy sector. And I will finish with some concrete action to improve the situation. So first of all, Ashley gave us an overview of the participation of women in terms of the workforce in the energy sector. In the EU, we also have quite a lot of data on the situation, and the picture doesn't look so good. Data from the European Commission published last year shows that the energy sector is largely male-dominated in all EU countries, and more alarmingly, with very limited signs of progress over the last decade. The representation increased from 20% in 2008 to 23% in 2019, so that's a 3% percentage point increase in a decade. And this overall figure really masks really vast differences according to sectors, with, for example, coal mining being the least feminized sectors with only 11% of women employees, where gas and electricity sector is positioned at the top with 25% of women. So this gives you an impression because overall in the EU, women represent 46% of employees. So when we see 23, it shows you how much behind this sector is lagging at the moment. When we look at the energy sector, renewable energy sector, the proportion of women is a bit higher with 32%. But there are some studies also showing that women tend to be overrepresented in low paid, as you were showing also, Ashley, low paid and non-technical jobs. And overall, there seems to be little prioritization in the industry towards an inclusive energy workforce. So this seminar today is really absolutely welcome. So in terms of governance of the sector in the EU, we see a similar picture appearing, with women being severely underrepresented. A study that you might be familiar with that was published already a decade ago, analyzing over 400 energy companies in Sweden, Germany, and Spain, showed that 65% of them did not have a single woman on their board, and only 5% of those companies, so that's 22 in total, had a fairly gender-balanced representation on their board. So this shows how much work remains to be done. But in terms of political decision-making, we see also some room for improvement, with only 27% of government ministers in the EU in charge of environmental and climate change portfolios being women. At the EU level, as it was mentioned in the interview that you showed at the beginning, the representation of women is quite higher than at national level, with 2 out of 4 European Commission's DGs working on the environment being led by women. So there is progress on some accounts, and still a lot of bottlenecks on other fronts. I wanted to mention a few examples of how we see that this underrepresentation of women might be one of the factors explaining the low level of gender responsiveness of energy policies. And more broadly, I want to mention 2 important policy agendas that have very wide ramification on the green transition. To give just one example, the Green Deal, and as the overarching policy agenda, and specifically the Fit for 55 package, Several analyses have shown that the gender and the intersectional perspective in this package is largely missing. Also, concerns were raised with the fact that it focuses on sectors that are really male-dominated, for example, construction, energy, or agriculture, raising fears that female-dominated sectors might miss out on very important public investments. Also, the social transition aspects of the Fit for 55 and of the Green Deal is still very ill-defined. It's still under development. There isn't much for us to see at the moment. Of course, the Social Climate Fund is a very ambitious endeavor. But also here again, concerns have been raised that the budget allocation so far is not adequate to the challenge at hand. Another example that I would like to raise in terms of that we can expect more in terms of energy policies being more responsive to the needs of different segments of society is the fact that energy prices have been a very central topic, I'm sure you're aware, at the moment at the EU political agenda. And in the past few months, it has really become a matter of urgency for most countries in the EU to address inflation and the growing risk of energy poverty. And despite the fact that we know that energy poverty is a very gendered phenomenon, it affects women most particularly, especially as they age or due to lower income, due to the gender pay gap and pension gap. We have seen very limited evidence so far that measures taken by countries to address energy prices and to prevent energy poverty, there is limited evidence that those measures have kept a gender or an intersectional perspective in mind. Many countries, for example, are trying to cut energy consumptions, and some of the suggestions sometimes are focusing on lowering the temperature of public buildings, limiting public lighting in the streets, shortening the working hours of certain public services such as kindergarten or other childcare services. So there are some concerns that some of those measures could add to women's unpaid care burden or affect their sense of safety in public spaces. So this is the sort of examples where we see that there is room for greater responsiveness to men and women's needs when it comes to energy and energy policy. So now I would like to just leave you with two concrete suggestions of action. The first is that we need more data on the gender and the intersectional perspective of the green transition. We know that transition policies affect different groups very differently, and they can sometimes, without a proper ambition and a social perspective, they might end up aggravating existing inequalities. So from that perspective, we at IGA are dedicating the next edition of the Gender Equality Index to the socially fair transition of the European Green Deal. And so we will be looking at the energy and transportation sector from a gender perspective. We will publish this report next October, and we are planning also a discussion with stakeholders to validate our findings sometime in the spring. We are also developing tools to support national and local authorities to incorporate a gender perspective in their policies and in their budget. Finally, I think that we need stronger and greater commitment to women's representation at every level of the sector's governance. And from that perspective, the adoption of the EU Directive on Women on Company Boards is clearly a step in the right direction. But it's far from being sufficient, especially as Ashley mentioned that very often board members are not executive positions. So it might not be sufficient to make a difference on the situation of women in the sector. Also, actions need to be taken to make organizational culture more welcoming of a diverse workforce, as Colette was saying, to make work-life balance a lived reality for people in the sector, to improve retention. Also work on addressing wage gap And from this perspective, the pay transparency directive being developed at the moment is a welcome development. I think we also need to promote accountability when it comes to sexual harassment and gender-based discrimination, and work on the burden of unpaid care that women in the sector face at home. From that perspective, as you know, last August, the Work-Life Balance Directive was transposed into national laws in most countries. So this is a step forward when it comes to a better distribution and more equal distribution of caring duties at home, and incentivizing fathers to take on caring duties. So in a nutshell, this is the aspects I wanted to bring out to the discussion, and I look forward to any questions or further discussion with you today. Thank you.
Many thanks, Blandine. Another very interesting presentation, very good insights. Also, thank you for having informed us of this upcoming report in October next year. We look forward to it, and yeah, we'll follow up. I mean, we are all engaged in this topics. Look forward to working with you. I see that there are a couple of questions in the chat. Let me see. Just one. Okay. It's a bit long. Or perhaps, yes, we go ahead and then, yes, okay, it's better. Let's start with a question here in the room. Anna, please.
Thank you very much. So first of all, a big congratulations on the launch of the energy base. As my director, Dieter Jürgen said that's an excellent tool and platform for shedding lights on women working in energy. And here I also would like to thank to all the speakers in this panel to also sharing the information. And here in this context, as a woman, but also as a mother, I have in fact the question and the comment on some of the aspects that you indeed presented on women in the energy sector. So my question is first to Ashley. So indeed, when you're presenting the data, I was wondering what kind of level of granularity did you go to in terms of, for instance, you mentioned there are different sectors you covered, but also I was wondering whether you look at the territorial dimension as well, because it's and here the question is linked to the presentation made by Blandine when she called for more information, more data, and she mentioned it in the wider context of EU Green Deal. And as you know, the first pillar of the EU Green Deal has this just transition dimension, and here the territorial aspect is very important because we're talking about coal regions which are going through a significant transition towards climate neutrality, but also about carbon regions where energy intensive industries are located. So as well, here there are big changes. And here comes my comment, which is the silver lining, if I may say so, of the empowerment of women as a result of the big transition that we are going through in climate neutrality. And the silver lining being that we see, especially in the coal-dependent regions, when the coal mines are being closed and many coal miners are losing their job, we see that here women step in and take responsibility for actually entering the job market. And there are many women who are entering also in the energy sector, so they're increasingly role of also of the startups as well in this area. And why I'm mentioning it, because in my work on just transition over the last over 2 years in the context of European Initiative for Coal Regions in Transition, we could see increasingly role of women who were discussing the new possibilities, new solutions, how together in the cooperation and the partnership we can prepare the strategies to prepare a better future for the next generation. And here it's this element of me being a mother comes into the play, but also what we can also see as similar as industrial transition when there were big crises happening. Often it is women who are very agile and respond, and they're much more maybe flexible to find different job opportunities. And I think here, especially in the green transition, so green sector, renewables, I think there is a excellent opportunity for women and to increase the share of women in the renewable energy sector. And I think this is the silver lining that we can see. So it's important to look into. And another aspect that I would like to draw, and it's my last comment, is that we can see in many of the EU-funded projects that there's indeed quite a lot of as well women who are entering this energy transition as well. So there's another aspect to look into. Thank you very much. That's all on my side, and congratulations once again. Good luck.
Thank you very much, Anna. Since we are a bit tight with time, I will just pair your questions with another question arrived from the chat. It's, if I may synthesize from Polly, there are some companies which actually pretend that they have a female friendly behavior or approach, but in fact you can see some practices that actually discourage, for example, women from applying for a certain position. And this has to do with the job description, the way it is worded. And it also has to do with the fact that almost naturally women tend to apply to jobs only where they feel that they have all the requirements listed in the job application. This is less likely to happen for men. So, and other things like women who have to take time off to take care of the kids, and that time can be actually, but can still be used as a something important for the growth, personal growth, and eventually also for the professional growth. So how to make sure that there is a female-friendly behavior when it comes to, for example, job postings and recruitment. And this is not really so specific to energy, but has this happened to you, or did you come across similar situations in your research and your study, particularly for the energy sector? Yeah, if you could, Ashley, perhaps you can reply to both quickly. Yeah.
Okay, so I will start with the first question, then just to mention about the granularity of the data. So from what I understand, you're talking about the employment data, and that is the only topic where we would really like to improve the granularity. So for the sectors of the energy sector, we have the core sector selectioned out. We also have important energy consumers, and we have an auxiliary category to capture certain things like fabrication of batteries or things that are very important to be keeping an eye on. So we have broken it down by those 3 dimensions. But I think, yeah, it's definitely something to look into further. And I think, yeah, the horizontal segregation of the sector is incredibly important to understanding where the issues are. As you mentioned, as was mentioned in the presentations, coal versus oil is very different. And just on the level of territories, all of our data is at the country level, but the IEA is looking into the exact issue you mentioned. That is a very big problem. So we have a new work stream on just transitions and people-centered transitions, and the topic of, for example, regions that have very high dependence on coal, where many people employed in coal, those of course risk to be very disrupted by the clean energy transition, and we need to take into account all the ramifications of that. As you mentioned, gender, that's an important dimension to take into account, of course. And I just want to mention that I completely agree with your comment. I think that this is an amazing opportunity. The clean energy transition, as we're moving to renewables, the entire sector is being transformed already. So, I mean, it's really the ideal time to make it more diverse and inclusive. It's just a win-win for everyone. So I think that's a nice positive note to always remind us that this is a golden opportunity. And if we talk about this now and collect the data and get the ball rolling, there's really great potential. So for the next comment, which was an excellent point about the job descriptions, and yes, that is very well-known and unfortunate issue across all sectors for gender. So I don't have, I mean, for the energy sector, I don't have insights to add, but I will mention the IEA. We're working with, well, we're developing a work stream looking at jobs and skills, and I'm going to be trying to add a gender dimension. For example, focusing on what you just mentioned, that looking at the job description, perhaps the wording, but it is, yeah, very challenging with those topics to understand and capture how this is impacting men and women differently. I think often surveys are required to understand it on both sides. But yes, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ashley. Are there any further comments or additions from Colette or Blondine?
Thank you so much. I would chime in to say, with regard to data collection, let me mention an overarching point that relates to both things we were discussing, data collection, and then looking at what are the barriers from keeping women from moving into positions of upward mobility. Leadership is required. So with regard to data collection, the regulator can request this information from the utilities that it regulates or from the companies that it regulates. That's a great way for us to get data. It doesn't mean that the regulator or the commission will take any action, but it would be a great way to get some consistent information that will really help us understand and identify the trends in the years to come. With regard to the human resource or human capital aspect, leadership is required there as well. We are often asking ourselves, where I am and in other jobs that I've held. By the way, I'm visiting with you all today from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., but I've served as chairman of the Arkansas Public Service Commission and, of course, at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We often ask ourselves, is a degree in, electrical engineering required to do this job? Is a degree in, some other thing required? And really being honest about what is necessary to perform a job function. I think it would also have the benefit of gaining a tremendous amount of human capital from all types, from this new generation of talent. We also want them in our working pool, and to ensure that women are being appropriately recognized and promoted as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Colette. Okay, good. So I think we can end here. I'm sorry, I see there's a lot of debate, but we're really short of time. So I will just finish by thanking very much our panelists, starting from Ashley Acker for setting the scene so well, and Colette Honorable and Blandine Maillard for being with us today and really being so inspirational for this discussion. Thank you very, very much. A big applause, please. So with this, we enter the second part, a bit in a rush of the session. But I would like now to introduce you to my colleague, Maria Claudia Carella. She's the coordinator of the Lights on Women initiative. And I know that before she goes into the details of the project and particularly of the energy base that we launched today, we have received a video of encouragement from one of our donors and supporters of the project of the energy base. So we have a video from Dagmar During, head of marketing and public relations at the company Landwärme. And after that, we hope to hear also from our colleague at Edison here, Elisa Rondella, who is the Director for Regulatory Affairs there. So these two companies were really instrumental for the development of the energy base that we will explain in details in a moment. Let's start with the video, if it's ready.
Hello, everyone in Florence and at home. My name is Dagmar Düring, and I'm honored to represent Landwärme here today. For those of you who don't know Landwärme, we are a pioneer in the renewable energy industry and now a leading biomethane trading company in Europe, based in Germany. As for myself, I'm the head of marketing and PR, and I'm very grateful to be speaking here today at such an important event, supporting women in the energy industry, an industry that is, up to now, male-dominated. But we want to change that together. That is why we're here. Because change needs visibility. And even though a lot of change is already happening in our industry as we're transitioning to fully green and sustainable energy supply, and also in line with societal changes, we are giving women and every gender the place they very well deserve. But there's still a long way to go. At Landwärme, we're trying our best to lead the way toward a more diverse energy industry. With a women's rate of more than half of our workforce, with a number of young female managers, different nationalities, a diversity task force, and an incredible urge to always improve and to be better and to work on ourselves. We want to set an example and we want to be the change that is so desperately needed. And even though, at least in our organization, sometimes it seems rather easy, a lot of the time it is not. But we've made a commitment to ourselves to do more team empowerment and toward more inclusion. And that is really something that we want to pass along. Walk the walk. It is worth it. What we gain is new perspectives, different opinions, and new angles, just to name a few. Because diversity and gender equality are things that are near and dear to our heart, we are honored to support the Lights on Women project. We observe that the energy industry is mainly led by men, and women, in comparison, are hard to find. And the energy base provides such a space to be seen so clearly and distinctively. It provides a network, it provides opportunities, it helps women support women, and most importantly, it gives women the chance to find their voice and to pass it along. It really shines the light on women and makes them shine. We're looking forward to all the collective female power and expertise in the energy base. We can't wait to tap into the knowledge and to get to know the personalities behind it. So much concentrated power and so many women to learn from. And for me personally, I see so much potential in the energy base and the Lights on Women project. As a young female leader myself, I believe that changing together and communicating and supporting each other is so important. Exchanging experiences, challenges we face, and sharing success, simply learning from one another is crucial for our growth. And now, as 2022 is coming to a close, for the years ahead, I would love to see so much more of that in and outside of the project. And maybe even honor women for their dedication and commitment. I want to say thank you to the Florence School of Regulation for initiating this wonderful project. Thank you to the women, and I know a few men have also been involved, for the hard work and for their dedication toward this important cause. We are looking forward to the next years, to new projects and to new ideas. And personally, I want to say thank you for having me here today.
Great. Elisa, would you like to take the floor?
Yeah. Once again, congratulations for what you were able to put in place. Well, just a few words about Edison and why we decided to support this project. Edison is the oldest energy company in Europe and is one of the leading actors in Italy. We are the third largest operator for installed capacity. We are the second largest gas importers, and we are also active in the sale of gas, electricity, and added value services for all market segments. Well, inclusion and diversity became part of Edison sustainability objectives in 2018, thanks to the works of the Transformation Team project, a cross-functional project promoted by the Executive Committee, with the goal to push and to update, let's say, the company's culture in the light of the transitional phase, energy phase. And also according to a survey we did internally, I took part of this process myself, gender was identified as one of the most relevant issue to cover. Well, since then, many actions have been developed. Specifically, we started to identify age and gender metrics with the idea that you can improve only what is accountable. And programs were put in place in order to improve women managerial skills, but also their ambitions in programming their career path. Some examples of these programs are the mentoring program that will start the 5th edition next year, and so far has involved more than 100 colleagues, and the mentoring community as well, in order to keep the discussion ongoing. We also have the Inspiring Ambassador program with the idea to go to school, to middle school, to talk about energy professions, with the idea to promote these professions also to young women, with the idea that education is the first step, that is the first engine for gender equality. And having said so, it came so natural for Edison to support the Lights on Women project, because we think it's definitely synergic to what we have done so far. And we think we still have to understand all the potential this instrument has. But of course, we would like to work and to use it in a bi-directional way. So on one side, taking advantages of the expertise that is represented by the women who will be part of this project. And for example, we often organize meetings, conferences, congresses. So we will be more than happy to host new colleagues and to share and to have discussion with them. But also on another direction. So we will encourage our colleagues in Edison to take part of this project, also to, let's say, to make their competencies well known outside Edison. So we really hope that we can use it in this bi-directional way, and more than happy to discover together all the potentials that this instrument, of course, has. So thank you, and congratulations once again.
Many thanks, Elisa. Many thanks to Dagmar. Many thanks, Gabor, who is here representing Landverme. Really, thanks a lot for your support in this project. Now we have not much time, sorry, Claudia, but I know you can be very efficient. Yes. Please.
So thank you all for being here. This has been a joy and very instructive. Because before going into the details of the Lights on Women project and the energy base, I wanted you to hear from the person who started the project, who founded it, and had the idea of establishing a database for women. This person is my former colleague, Jessica Dabrowski, who is now Deputy Director of Communications at the Atlantic Council. And I pass the floor to you, Jessica.
Thanks, Claudia. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to see the team from the FSR again. And I think that the energy base is just going to be a wonderful project, but I just wanted to give a bit of context on the Lights on Women initiative and its origin story. So we launched when in 2017, the Florence School launched Lights on Women to take a proactive role in fostering gender equality and greater diversity and inclusion in the energy sector. And in the years following its launch, the initiative took targeted measures to boost women's visibility, representation, and opportunities in the sector, while also tackling many of the biases, stereotypes, and barriers to upward mobility that my fellow panelists have mentioned today. The Lights on Women Scholarship is just one example of the great work the initiative has done, offering specialized training to a diverse global talent pool of women in energy, climate, and sustainability. And another is the transformational work that the FSR undertook internally in partnership with the partnership of Jean-Michel Glachant and the entire team, as Ilaria mentioned earlier, to make systemic changes from the top down and the bottom up. The school has demonstrated the power of leading by example through its deliberate action to create an inclusive work environment and culture. And this transformation from the inside out, I strongly believe, is what has fueled the team's passion and ongoing commitment to advancing Lights on Women and its mission. So now it's my great pleasure to pass the floor back to Claudia Carella, who continues the development of Lights on Women to discuss the latest edition, the Energy Base. And this database is a much needed tool to break down barriers for women in accessing the energy, climate, and sustainability sectors, incentivizing innovative approaches in hiring processes, and ultimately developing an inclusive and diverse workforce within these fields. So thank you so much again for having me today. And over to you, Claudia.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And now we are up for the more interactive part of this session. I wanted to give you a sort of an overview of the Lights on Women project, where we are at in terms of impact and what is our vision for the future. But also, I wanted to encourage you all to see for yourself the perks and the sort of solutions that the Energy Base offers. So, as was mentioned before, the Lights on Women project is an initiative within the Florence School of Regulation and was sponsored by Edison and Lamverme. There is a problem with this slide, but I do remember. Our reasons to act and the reasons why we act now are multiple. So first of all, as we have mentioned, there are challenges for women in the energy sector that range from them being paid less, being promoted less, being less represented, and also facing more challenges in times of energy and climate crisis. They also are very powerful agents of change. And as Ashley was mentioning, they are part of a new transformation of the energy sector. And that is why we have developed this initiative for them. So what are our actionable goals for 2023? With the Lights on Women platform and within the framework of the work that FSR commits to, First of all, with the platform, we aim to have a space, a safe space for discussion and growth. We also want to educate, train, mentor, and upskill female professionals to break down barriers. But also we intend to strengthen the visibility and to give women due for the diverse roles that they play in the energy transition. We also want to add an intersectional dimension to our actions, and we have seen with the panel today how important this is. The FSR also intends to create new career advancement opportunities through calls, scholarships, and vacancies. And finally, we find that it is very important that we monitor, survey, and audit the state of the sector concerning gender equality and inclusivity matters. So what is the new Lights on Women platform? As Jessica was saying, the Lights on Women was up and running for a while now, since 2017. With this new initiative, we plan to offer concrete career advancement opportunities for women in energy, climate, and sustainability. I invite you now, you have in front of you a QR code, and people online could just scan the QR code to take a tour with me of the platform and see what are the new additions to the project, and what are the new tools that I think can alleviate some of the challenges that women face in hiring and in being recruited for panels, for example. So as I was saying, the energy base is meant to be this tool that encompasses female professionals from different seniority levels from anywhere in the world, and working on the widest array of topics. And these topics were selected by our academic staff to include women of different professionalities. Also, we think we have a pretty good offering for the searchers, and these are the people, the companies and the institutions who are looking to diversify their talent pool and to include more women in their ranks. And for them, they will find on the platform maximum granularity to filter through the professionals, the experts. They will find vetted experts. That means that these people are known to the FSR, and we know their work, and we can vouch for them. They will also find easy to read CVs, and they will be able to scan through them and select them for potential opportunities. So this is a view of the listing of talent that we have on the energy base. As you can see, you will find already live, up and running, search bar where you can filter through title, languages spoken by our professionals, topics that they are exploring in either their work or research. You can see that also we have this functionality that I have mentioned for verified users, and that is that yellow check there. With this, we plan to have a perfect matching between demand and offer of talent in the energy, climate, and sustainability sectors. So this is also a view of the way CVs will be shown on the platform, and you will find extensive information and information relevant to people that intend to hire or choose women for panels, for example. You will find bios, language spoken, all the tags that include the topics our female experts are interested in. And finally, very important, you will find a button to get in touch with our female professionals, and they will also find space to message each other, like if they are registered as female users. The energy base is not the only part that we have within the Lights on Women website platform. We also have a blog that I'm very happy to say that has featured over 70 blog entries since its start. We also had over 40 contributor writers to it, and every day we are expanding on this wealth of resources that we have in this blog. I missed one slide, and this is one of the things we are most proud about. It's our flagship opportunity that Jessica mentioned. It's the newest edition of the 5th Lights on Women Scholarship. We are launching it today, and it's already available on the platform. And this is meant for early stage women who will be awarded through the scholarship a free seat to one of our FSR training courses. And this has been the longest standing opportunity in our website, and we plan to add more to them with the Florence School of Regulation, but also with the help of our partners. Finally, I wanted to leave you with a positive note. I know that we have spoken at length about the challenges that women face in the energy, climate, and sustainability sectors. But the FSR is on the front lines of trying to alleviate these challenges. And our ongoing effort includes already like a big network of women working in the energy sector, over 1,300 coming from everywhere in the world and working in academia, the industry, and the international institutions. And this is to say that women specialists, experts are out there for us to tap into their knowledge. Again, the FSR is proud to be launching new opportunities for the 2023. And finally, one other thing we are very happy about is that the Lights on Women project was recently made a full member of the European Commission's Equality Platform, which is tasked to strengthen equality and inclusion across the energy sector in Europe and beyond. One last remark from me would be a thank you to the team at the FSR who has made this possible. Ilaria Conti, you already know her full well, who has been instrumental in this launch and all around suggesting ways for this to be working at its best. Antonio Pistilli, our web developer who has been creating the platform from scratch, Elena Iorio, our administrative officer, and Gianluca Dolfi, our multimedia specialist. Thank you so much for being with us today. I will give the floor back to Ilaria for the last, to Leonardo, apologies for the last comments. Thank you.
Well, happy to say a few words. Actually, two comments. So one, as the newly appointed director of the school, I can only be proud and really thank all the mainly women, right, that led this initiative. And that is, you know, also helping us as a school to evolve, right? You are not only helping the rest of the energy sector to evolve, but we also still have some work to do. And I also thank you for reminding us on not daily basis, but almost a daily basis. And no, but also to provide ideas, right? And how to do it. So this tool will be very useful for us also. And I think also we as a school are on a journey to improve ourselves and to become a better school in many dimensions, but also in the dimension of diversity in general, and especially gender balance. And then the second comment I wanted to make is a more personal one. I was really impressed by all these facts, but besides facts, sometimes anecdotes can also be very, thought-provoking. And in the very beginning, we saw the video of Dita Juul Jorgensen, which is really, really nice. And she showed us that the Commission is really leading, right? Currently in the energy sector, we have a female director general, we have a female energy commissioner. And we have a president of the European Commission that is female, which was the first. And that's where the anecdote comes in. So when Ursula took up her new position, I saw the impact that can have on young girls, because I am a father and my daughter at school was asked to give a presentation in front of class on, you know, who inspired her. And that was exactly at the time when Ursula was put in place in that new role. And she took Miss von der Leyen as the subject. And she really asked me, you know, she was 10 at the time or 11. She asked me, so how do I become the president of the European Commission? And I gave my best answer possible at that moment, but it just shows, and she's probably going to change her mind 10 times, you know, but it shows that you know, role models really matter, really matter. I have seen that in practice, and so it's bringing new ambition to the new generation. So let's not underestimate the importance of that. That's it. So thank you again. I think and thanks also, you know, to the supporters. It's really nice of you that you have done that. And I hope we can bring it to the next level in the coming years. Because as Jessica reminded us, this is already an effort that is going on for years, right? It started small and it's becoming bigger and bigger. So I'm very proud of that. Well done, man.
Thank you.
Great, thanks for sticking with us. I learned a lot today. I hope this is the case for everybody. And yes, please be reassured that we will keep working on this. There are several already initiatives boiling, but we don't want to give you too much information in advance. But yeah, thanks very much for all your support. Thanks also to the participants online. Bye.